How much time do you have?
As much as you need.
Cool.
Sweet. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Hi everyone, this is another episode of Fun.net, and today it's our pleasure to have Haack on the show. Hi Phil.
Hi Bertrand, how are you doing?
Great. And you're here in person because you actually live in the area.
Yeah, I live about 2 miles away and happy to be here. First time on your show, and it's a pleasure.
So you work from home?
Yes, I do.
How cool is that?
It's great. When I joined GitHub, about 60 or 70% of us were remote. Now it's down about 50, I think, but in the engineering group, it's around, I think, 50 or 60% of us work all over the world.
Right, so GitHub is a very distributed kind of company.
Yeah, very much so. And I think one of the interesting aspects of it is that because we started working that way very early on, even when the core group was in San Francisco, they would often work from cafes or from home. It's very much in the culture. So if you recall, you probably know this, anytime you are in a call with someone remote at Microsoft, you spend the first 15 minutes trying to get the equipment working. So we have a lot less of that, except nowadays when we call people in our headquarters, they often have the same issue.
Yeah.
But it's more like 5 minutes.
Okay, so I guess everybody knows you, but just in case there are 1 or 2 people out there who don't know about you, can you tell us about your history with .NET and GitHub?
Sure. So for you 1 or 2 people who don't know me, my name is Phil Haack.
I know, right?
Yeah, only those 2 people. They probably live in Antarctica. So I used to work at Microsoft. In fact, Bertrand and I were both on the larger ASP.NET team at the same time. Ancient history. I was the program manager for ASP.NET MVC, which is a web framework for building applications. And I also was the program manager for NuGet, which is a package manager that has really taken off in that space.
Yep.
And then about 5 years ago, I joined GitHub, and I was a developer on the GitHub for Windows application. So it's a client that makes it, kind of streamlines the workflow for working with Git and GitHub. But these days, I am now a director of engineering there of a group that we call Client Apps. So we have 4 teams. We work on the desktop app, which is like GitHub for Windows, GitHub for Mac. We work on Atom, which is a text editor. Electron, which is sort of a framework for building cross-platform apps using web technologies. It's Node and Chromium based. And then there's an editor tools team, which we make extensions for like a GitHub extension for Visual Studio and potentially other editors.
Very nice. So you are in charge of a lot of products.
These days, yeah.
Yeah. So do you still code?
Yeah, I still code, not as much as I used to, and I kind of miss that part. The other day I was working on a fun thing though. I was helping a coworker. We're building out this exercise for candidates to do a take-home coding exercise that we time block, but we've automated the entire process so that we could, once you submit a PR with your code solution, it gets anonymized, and then we have people get notified automatically, and they can go grade it. And so my coworker built the Ruby version, and I built the Node version. So I'm now a Node programmer.
Ooh.
Yeah. JavaScript is the best language.
I know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say that in the .NET show.
I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
I love JavaScript, but the best language.
Yeah, didn't you write Atlas back in the day?
Nice save.
Yes, I did. Absolutely. Yeah.
He's trying to block that from his memory.
No, I do have a history of doing JavaScript at Microsoft, so yeah, you're right.
I still write a little C# here and there too. I work on a few open source projects, Scientist.net.
Oh, you work on that?
Yeah, I started that. Yeah. So for those who don't know, Scientist.net is a port of a Ruby project created by some of my coworkers. So they did the hard work of figuring out like the APIs and the design and all that. But it allows you to run A/B tests on code paths within your code. So imagine you're doing a big refactoring, and you're not going to change the behavior, but you're trying to do a more, let's say, high performant pass through this thing, but you got to make sure nothing changes. So a really good example of this is we recently changed our diff and merge algorithm on GitHub.com. And we're like, we have to make sure the behavior is exactly the same. So what we did is we used scientists to run both code paths at the same time. And we, obviously we discarded the new code path and just kept using the old one. But we would record any differences of behavior. And then over time we get this nice graph of like what changed and what the performance implication was. And then at one point when we got to a point where we felt really confident that the behavior was exactly the same, we just switched over. And so scientist.net is a port of that, so you can do that sort of thing within your own applications, for very tricky or very important refactorings.
Nice. So what's new in GitHub for Windows users and .NET users? Is there anything you've been working on that would be of interest to users?
Just the other day we released a new update to Atom that has a lot of improvements for Windows users, including a 64-bit version. In fact, do you know Damien Gard?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's working on that these days.
Oh,
yeah, so
nice.
Damien used to work on Link to SQL and other Link things, but he's working on Atom he's primarily focused on Atom for Windows, but he's working on some other cool things too within Atom. And then on the GitHub for Windows, we've slowed down a little bit on it, but we just released one with the latest version of Git, and then I've worked a little bit on that recently as well, like putting some patches together for some bug fixes and whatnot. And the PoshGit folks, so PoshGit is a PowerShell extension that gives you tab completion with Git, and it's really nice. Keith Dalby and his team over there, it's an open source project, it's not his team, but they're about to have version 0.7 with a lot of nice improvements, so we're going to pull that in and release that soon as well.
Okay. What about the extensions in Visual Studio and
obviously.
The Git handling that is in VS Code as well? Did you contribute?
So we've not been working with the VS Code team on the Git handling, but we have been working on the Visual Studio extension for GitHub extension for Visual Studio, and today I think it was just announced that Visual Studio 2017 is a thing. So in case nobody knew what was coming next. Yeah,
total surprise for everyone.
Yeah, total surprise for everyone. Well, I saw it online, so I know I'm not breaking any NDAs by saying that. But we will have an extension ready for that version. We recently added what we call our collaborator workflow. So if you install our extension from Visual Studio, you can log into GitHub. You can view your pull requests. You can check out a pull request. You can see the diffs and all that of a pull request. So it gives you a really nice way of working with pull requests. So if someone submits a pull request and you're like, hey, I want to try it out, see if it runs, you go to the pull request dialog. It's in the Team Explorer pane. Click on the pull request, get the code down on your machine, and then you could run the code. And that's all from within Visual Studio, because we're running on this theory that people who really like to be in Visual Studio never want to leave, They're wearing their pajamas.
Yeah, well, you have different users doing.
No, we have different users, and that's why we also.
Trying pull request, that's very important, and I can't wait to test that one.
Yeah. So a lot of the work we're doing. So the nice thing about the work we're doing for Visual Studio is it's all open source. It's in github.com/GitHub Visual Studio, which is really interesting that we chose that name, because we thought, it's a GitHub extension for Visual Studio, but we still get bug reports from people on issues that are unrelated to what we're doing in Visual Studio. So we tell them to use the report feedback feature or whatever it is in Visual Studio. So don't bother us, if the editor's broken. But in terms of VS Code, we've talked to them quite a bit about potential crossover and working together. I think with the recent vacation and all that, we sort of you just reminded me I need to get back in touch with those folks and see what else we can do together, because having a great Git experience in there and a GitHub experience in there would be, I think, useful because I think their audience is growing quite a bit.
Yep, it is. Definitely. So do you know that .NET is almost 15 years old now?
Wow, how old does that make me?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, I didn't know. Isn't it like Visual Studio's birthday as well?
As well, that will be
Wow.
the 20th anniversary.
Yeah, if you recall, before it was called .NET, there was like the codename Cool.
Yes.
And so I was doing classic ASP and SQL Server back in the day, and we're like, oh, we got to check out this cool new language. And then it was like ASP Plus, and then it became ASP.NET. So yeah, I was there
.NET
at the
was cool
beginning.
before it was a thing.
Yeah. And
Very
it's trying to get its
hipster.
cool back now, right?
Well, yeah. I hope. So, do you remember the first time you came in contact with .NET?
Yeah, I took a course with Jeffrey Richter,
Oh.
the Wintellect, back when he was in Wintellect. I don't know if that's still a thing, but up here in Redmond, my company flew me out here, and I took a course, and it was pretty deep, like everything Richter does, right? So yeah, that was my first exposure, really, and then I got his C# via CLR book. Actually, back then it was called something else. I can't remember, like the .NET framework or something.
You've written a few books yourself, right?
Yeah.
I remember one with your head on the cover, and maybe Hanselman's head.
Yeah. People call it the 5-head book.
Yes, Rob Connery was there.
Yeah, because it's me, Scott Hanselman, Rob Connery, and Scott Guthrie.
Yes.
And apparently we all have big foreheads, and so so big that people call them 5 heads, and they call it the 5-head cover. And then someone made a Photoshop that one where they elongated
extended
it.
them,
Yeah,
and
that's my
I've seen
claim to
that.
fame. I have a very elongated forehead,
Yeah,
and
we should probably
it's like
use that image.
asymptotic in growth.
Yeah. We should probably use that image for the
The
preview of the video.
Yeah. But that book was about ASP.NET MVC1 when we released it, and I think it did fairly well. It was fun. It was fun for if you find beating yourself up and torture fun. It was a fun experience writing that book.
Yeah, writing books is an interesting experience.
Yeah, it's. I don't know why I keep doing it. I always hate it every single time, and then I'll have an idea and that idea needs to get out there, but I should just write a Medium post and be done with it.
Is there anything coming in GitHub that you'd like to talk about, or that you can talk about? Actually.
No, I mean, we generally don't like to talk a whole lot about what we're working on. Mainly,
until it's done, you mean?
Yeah, because there's so many things that we've started and sort of decided to prioritize something different.
Yeah.
And I think if people knew what could have been there and didn't, quite make it just yet, people would be upset. But then, they wouldn't realize, but that led to something else that you really like out there, right? I can tell you some things we just released. I think. I'm starting to blur the lines of what's actually out there and what's coming. But we've improved the pull request flow quite a bit recently, and I think that's been kind of a long time coming. The ability
the reviews.
Yeah, the reviews and being able to do that, and then I realize I'm live, so I don't want to make a mistake and steal anyone else's thunder.
There is this feature where you can instead of just putting individual comments, you can actually put several comments as part of
that's
a single
the
review,
yeah.
And you can give the pull request an approve or reject or demand changes. That sort of workflow.
Yeah, so that's been out there for a little while now, and mainly we've been, a lot of the features in the last year have been sort of in a response to the Dear GitHub letter, so we've really focused a lot on maintainer and open source workflows. We'll have more of that coming. just recently, I was involved in a discussion on about .NET language design. Speaking of .NET, and we've received a lot of feedback about the challenges of holding language design discussions in GitHub, and so
Yes.
I've definitely shared that feedback internally with folks, and so we may not like address them one by one individually, but I'm hopeful that at some point there will be a more holistic solution that kind of addresses like a lot of those key things all at once.
Yeah, so for people who haven't followed that, the story was that the language design for .NET languages was done on GitHub. Still is to this day, but it actually went to a mailing list for a little while, and people were really upset about that.
Yeah.
So it came back on GitHub. Well, it is coming back on GitHub. I shouldn't say that it did, but it is coming back on GitHub, I believe. All the details are easy to find about this.
Yeah,
But
you can find that on
GitHub. But apparently the way the command threads work on GitHub is not entirely 100% satisfactory to that particular usage.
Right. I mean, issues are really optimized for issues, right? Like code bug reports, and when you have these open-ended, long-term threaded discussions,
Yes.
It starts to break down for what the language design team needs. But it's great for me as a consumer, where I just want to check out what's the latest discussion on tuples or whatever. It's been wonderful, and I've really enjoyed seeing the C#
It's
language.
searchable. It's
Searchable. You can cross-reference people, all that thing. But I understand. I am also sympathetic to the language design team who's got to deal with this huge influx of conversations where people are drilling down into different things, and it's all interwoven, and they're like, yeah, this is hard for us to manage. What's funny is I think one of the problems is that, and I'm working through this with one of the engineers, where I think there's a bug in Outlook and how it doesn't group messages from GitHub because Gmail does it. And so he thinks it's a bug in GitHub. And so we're iterating now over email, trying to figure out what is the root cause, because I'm happy to go and try to figure out what's wrong on our side, but we're digging deep into the SMTP spec.
Okay. Is it fair to say that the way GitHub works with smaller open source projects and larger open source projects, the experience it has some significant differences, and is it something that you're working on and improving, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the matters of scale just are difficult for any project, anywhere you host it, right? Anywhere you put it. Managing a project like Rails on, GitHub or
Right.
.NET
Or
for that
.NET,
matter versus, Scientist.NET or OctaKit. That's another small project I'm involved with. We get so few comments and this and that, related to it. But we have our own challenges with Atom is a really good example.
Yeah.
The amount of incoming just gets challenging, but a lot of that can't really be solved by technology anyways, right? The technology can maybe ameliorate some of the friction of it, but we just need more hands on deck helping to triage all this stuff. It's just too much. So I think we are aware of it. The number of projects that hit that scale obviously are much smaller than the number of small projects, but it's almost as if our product and GitHub is maturing around the same age as at the same pace as the whole community, maybe slightly behind, right? Where we are now facing the same kind of problems these larger open source projects or larger companies are facing, and so we're starting more and more to address them. So for example, Microsoft on GitHub, has its share of challenges, right? You're a 100,000 person company. We have we have orgs, and Microsoft in a single org would be somewhat unwieldy. We don't have that problem. We're only, 600 people or so. But, we're getting to that point where if the product doesn't work for us, we'll be more highly motivated to address those issues that we run into. But we're also, very careful. We have a good relationship with Microsoft. We're listening to you all. we have good relationships with, like Facebook and Google, and we, you all have a similar set of challenges with scale on GitHub, and so I can't say specifically what we're doing to address it, but that we are listening and we are working on things, I think.
You mentioned number of projects, that it was a relatively small number of projects that had this kind of issue, but is it the right metric? I mean, if you look at the number of contributors.
Right, No, I mean,
how does it compare? Do you have, when you compare number of contributors in small projects and number of contributors in larger projects, what kind of scale do you get?
That's a really good question. I mean, when you look at like sort of the long tail, right? Like if you sum up that part of the curve versus the part that has the big projects, like what is the thing? I actually don't know. That is a good question for me to ask others, like out of curiosity. If you're interested in figuring that out yourself, there's something called the GitHub archive. So you can connect to it using Google BigQuery, for example, and you can actually run your own queries against all our public event data. So it's a really good way to find out, investigate the open source community yourself. Yes. It's one of the ways that, for example, I discovered that I was trying to, one of the, at this point in my role, I don't necessarily have skin in the game of whether .NET succeeds or not, right? For me, it's more important to know, well, is it continuing to grow or not? Because that tells me how much to invest in that area, right? So I need to know the answer, not confirm my biases. And so, one of the tools I use is GitHub Archive, and we looked at the fastest growing communities on GitHub. And C# is among those, right? It's, I think, I don't know if it's second or third in terms of recent growth. A lot of that I would attribute to Microsoft's embracing of it and moving .NET and all this other stuff to it that has, add-on effects for everyone else moving there. But that doesn't tell me the full picture of .NET's growth, right? That just tells me that people, .NET has finally discovered GitHub and is moving there in droves. It doesn't tell me if the overall community is growing. But it is an interesting data point, and I think using GitHub Archive to study that kind of stuff is really interesting. So you can, that's your homework.
Yes.
You answer that question.
Oh yeah. And I want to say GitHub is a fantastic source of data for everything that has to do with open source, of course. And as you said, it's only part of the picture, but it's such an important part of the picture today. Stack Overflow is another one that has a lot of interesting data. So between those two, you can get a lot of data free, and anybody can do that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, Stack Overflow is great with that, where all their data is Creative Commons, and they recently published something about what languages do people search or ask questions about in the weekdays and the weekends, and they're very different. And so I was, some folks at GitHub were wondering, well, what would our data look like, and would it be different because what you ask about on the weekend versus what you're actually coding on the weekends, might be two different things as well, right? Side projects versus homework, that's a hypothesis. And so there's a hypothesis there that we could actually test out with the data if someone had the spare time to do so.
So I don't know how much you're following what's happening with .NET. Is there anything in .NET that's happening today that you're particularly excited about? Or not?
I've been very much in a wait and see because of the churn. With OctaKit and Scientist.net, for example, we embraced Project JSON, and now we're trying to convert it back to CS Proj. And I'm, having been on the other side, I'm sympathetic to the decisions, but as a open source maintainer, I'm just fortunately, I have some amazing contributors, and I've basically just said, hey, can you all figure this out? And they're doing it, and so many props to the folks contributing to those projects. They're doing the work that I don't have to figure out, and right now don't want to. But I'm kind of looking at where that hockey puck is going, right? And I think the direction is really interesting to me. .NET Standard kind of cleaning up the versioning nightmare that was introduced with PCLs, and the cross-platform aspects of it, I think will be really interesting. for me personally, it's like, I don't know how much I'm going to be using that, .NET Core, in the near future. Because like if I'm doing cross-platform desktop, naturally I'd probably choose Electron. But if I was doing cross-platform mobile, then that becomes like .NET Core becomes a really interesting option for that. My brother, for example, is doing a coding dojo. So he's my younger brother, and he's trying to make a career change. And Coding Dojo is one of these coding boot camp schools. There's like General Assembly and all these other ones, and they're learning like Node and Ruby on Rails. And I was like how many of these schools are teaching like C#.NET Core, right? Like I don't think that'll happen until .NET Core is really baked and been out there for a while. But it could be a good option for learning if things get cleaned up and there's it gets
I
less
know
confusing.
that Scott Hanselman's team, in particular Maria, is doing some work to get .NET in some of those schools.
Yeah, that'll be
So,
interesting to
yeah.
see how pervasive that is. I think for me, like, for .NET to continue growing and to be successful, it needs to really gain that mindshare and people learning, right? Like, if you go to, how many colleges have it as part of their curriculum? How many boot camps, include as an option? Like, Node is everywhere, right? Like, Node is like table stakes at this point. Any of these schools are going to teach you a bit of Node, because no matter what you're doing with the web, you're going to have to learn JavaScript anyways. Might as well learn Node. So I think C# has its work, or .NET has its work. See, I always associate .NET and C# and F# and VB.NET. They all have their work cut out for them to really gain that level of penetration in the developers who are starting to learn how to do it. The enterprise, it's great, right? It's already there.
Yeah. Do you think that JavaScript has a very particular place because it's what runs in the browser, or is there something more to it? Having worked on Electron,
Well, I can tell you all the
probably
things
have
wrong
a
with
unique
JavaScript, right?
perspective.
I think the fact that it runs in the browser and it's sort of the lingua franca of the web gives it a special place in. I bet people are tweeting me. No, it gives it a special place in like in terms of like it's very hard to unseat it, right? We've run into a lot of problems with it, right? The fact that there's no int type, like numbers are this weird thing, and there's no real threading model. You can't control whether things are allocated on the heap or stack. Like all this causes us to drop into other things, where we're like, oh, let's, we're gonna have to drop into C++. Oh my goodness, Well, we're learning that modern C++ has improved quite a bit, but
Yeah, but it's still a tall cliff.
yeah, it's still dangerous, right? And there's Rust, which is promising, but we've had trouble getting Rust to build on Windows properly. And this is an area where, like, potentially, like we C++, C#, .NET Core C# could, be an option there, right? Like, depending on what type of problem we're trying to solve, where we need something cross-platform, we need it to interop with JavaScript really well. But yeah, I mean, like, if you're always gonna have to learn JavaScript, and that's, I think, the advantage that it has right now. The other new development, though, is like things like TypeScript. I think are like really interesting in that they kind of shore up some of the problems with JavaScript, right? Like we've been doing some teams over at GitHub have been using TypeScript quite a bit, and I have some folks who worship at the Church of Anders, and I really like TypeScript. I like it a lot. I like that it gives a bit more like comfort in being able to describe your intentions for how code variables should be used, and have the system actually check types and all that. The stuff I'm used to in C#.
It manages to remain close to JavaScript in spirit, and to be very, very friendly to .NET developers.
Yeah. But it doesn't solve the performance problems, right? Atom is a good example of this, where like there's some structures, data structures that we're having to rebuild in other languages because we just can't quite get the control and both in memory and performance sticking solely with JavaScript.
Interesting. So Atom actually falls back to native code a lot.
Like we're trying to keep as much as possible in JavaScript because it's just easier for people to pick up and contribute. But there are, for the text editor, there may be key data structures that are so important to the performance and the memory consumption that we, are investigating, like, rewriting in C++.
I see. Interesting. Kendra, do we have any questions from?
No, I've been
interwebs?
checking Gitter and
Okay.
Twitter, and it looks like it's pretty silent, but we do have a lot of people watching, so that's
We
cool.
do? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, people.
Hi, people.
Well, there are also people watching later, people from the future.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
They can go back in time and ask questions.
Yeah.
Uh,
I had to bring time travel into it.
Yeah, I used to be a physicist, so immediately my head starts spinning.
Bertrand's in another place now.
Yeah.
I wonder.
One thing I'm really, but to go back to the recent stuff with .NET, like one thing that's really exciting about it is to see it happening in the first place. When I was working on ASP.NET MVC, we'd often have these meetings where we're like, oh, why are we doing it this way? Well, we're building on top of the existing .NET framework, which has been around 13 years, and there's these like hacks upon hacks upon hacks to account for like long dead systems that were written 10 years ago that are no longer around, but because of back compat, we have to do things this way, right? And Hunter and I used to joke about wanting to create ASP2.NET, where we just throw everything out, rebuild the whole thing, and build it from scratch and have it all be great. And I was joking. I mean, it was like, yeah, I wanted it, but I was like, yeah, this will never happen. But somehow, it's happening.
Yeah, well, rewrites are a well-known problem in software engineering. So
Right. Well, I think the beauty of this approach is you take the good code, you get rid of all the back compat and stuff, so you're not rewriting everything from scratch, but you're cleaning up all the code that you couldn't clean up because you were concerned about back compatibility. I mean, back compat is great and all, but like when you can't even move anything forward because like you're concerned about some Windows 3.1 user, like that one person out there.
So yeah, it's useful to shake the tree from time to time and see what falls. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, you're gonna like I don't envy the challenge of like getting people to port over and explaining that, because I know there's a lot of people will be very upset about like, oh, I gotta learn this new thing,
Do you have any? Is there anything that you would like to see in .NET? That if you had a magic wand and you could make any feature happen?
Oh, gee. I bet a better idea will come to me later, but one thought that comes to me is I think you wrote a blog post about image generation on the server, and it sounds like there isn't actually yet a good solution there.
Well, I believe there is now. There is more than one actually.
Okay.
So define good.
Well, each one has trade-offs, and those trade-offs don't seem fundamental to the problem. So, like one that doesn't have any of those trade-offs.
That's a fair point. So I would say that there are basically two categories of libraries that you can use today. One is completely managed code, and there is only one library in that category. That's image sharp. And then you have those that require a native dependency, and those are a little trickier to install on some platforms, or in some cases are not cross-platform at all. But there is Kia Sharp that has become available for .NET Core. I need to update that post, by the way. I'm working on that. It will come probably next week. But with Kia Sharp, we have a library that has a native counterpart. So the install can be tricky on Linux, for example. You still have to build some stuff from source.
Oh, I thought of something. How about a GraphQL client library?
A what?
GraphQL client library. So we don't have to write it.
I don't even know what GraphQL is.
So GraphQL is this specification and API developed by Facebook, but we've adopted it as well.
Oh,
you might
okay.
recognize
Yes,
it
yes,
if I
yes, yes.
describe a Microsoft technology that came close but isn't quite GraphQL, which was, oh my god, it's REST-based.
Yeah. Now I know what you're talking about. Yes. Okay.
What was the one that we came up with? We actually built our first NuGet API on it and instantly
OData?
regretted it. What? OData, that's it. So it basically it's kind of like OData, but
Right.
done better. And no offense to OData folks, but like it's, you can send a request and say, here's the shape of the data I want. So, here's a good example for the GitHub API, the type of thing you'll be able to do as we flesh out our GraphQL API, which is, hey, another thing that I can talk about that's coming. So we have a GraphQL API, but we're actually fleshing it out even more. Today, if you wanted to get you can make an API call for an issue, and then for that issue, you can grab all its comments, right? Or but if you want a set of issues and a set of comments for those issues, you would have to make n+1 requests, right?
Right.
With GraphQL, you could describe the shape of the data you want. Like, hey, I want the top 10 issues and all their comments, but only these fields in those comments.
And then that can be optimized.
And so you send that, we do parse the thing, and then we figure out what you need, and then we send it back, and we do the one query on the backend side. And so that's going to lead to a lot more efficient use of the API and more powerful use of the API, where you can get just what you want, you can optimize what gets sent over the wire, and I was running into problems trying to do some basic stuff. The .NET framework team, you guys have done a really good job with some of your blog posts about the state of your open source work on GitHub, and you had this one chart, I remember. It was like the average time that it takes someone to commit on an issue. And I thought, that's beautiful, I wish we had that graph. I'll go make one, on my own projects using our API. And I was like, oh man, because I had to, request every single issue and then request all the comments just to get the first one for every single issue.
Yeah.
And I'd hit the API limit if I went too fast. So with GraphQL, that'll be a thing of the past.
Right. Yeah. So you have all that data that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, so I could have used the GitHub archive, but I was being lazy.
Yeah.
Like, I already know how to use the API. I was like, I'll just do the API. So today I would just go to the GitHub archive and figure it out.
Right, but better ways to query that data are coming.
Yeah, because
Cool.
the
Cool.
benefit of the GraphQL is it'll work against your private repos, which won't be in the GitHub archive data for obvious reasons.
So there are no libraries in .NET that do GraphQL today, or
Oh, that's
is
a
there
good
only
question.
client?
I
or-
haven't yet looked, to be quite honest, but that might be a thing I should find out, like if there's one.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know.
Yeah. And then incorporate it into the framework, so I don't have to look.
Yeah, well, that's a different question. But step one is to see if there
Well,
is.
you
if
asked
there
me
is
for
a
my wish
library.
list. That's what I wish.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's perfect.
I'm not saying it's reasonable. I'm just saying that's what I want.
Yeah, and I gave you the magic wand.
Like
so
most things I
that's,
want, it's not necessarily reasonable.
Yeah, sure. Just to finish that thought about imaging libraries. So Skia Sharp is really getting very interesting because now it's compatible with .NET Core. It is cross-platform. It's very cross-platform. You can even use it on Android and iOS.
Oh, cool.
I believe. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. But, well, that's probably
I'll
why
look it up,
Xamarin is
yeah.
so interested in it. And Xamarin is maintaining the Skia Sharp library.
Cool.
The
I'll
wrapper.
check it out.
So yeah, and it's so blazing fast. It's the fastest of all. So
Cross-platform and fast. See, that's what I'm
yeah,
talking
so
about,
it's really hitting a sweet spot.
Cool.
But I really like Image Sharp for the fact that it's completely managed, which means that it makes it so easy to install. It's just a NuGet.
That's nice.
That's it. You don't need to install any native dependencies.
Just go use
By the
NuGet.
way, we need to stick it in Miguel's face. How do you say NuGet? What is?
NuGet.
There you go. That is the official.
Wait, is
pronunciation.
there an alternative pronunciation?
Because Miguel, his fanciness says NuGet.
NuGet, yeah. Well, he's a little frou-frou right now. Oh, what's the word? She? Is it fancy?
Yeah, she.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing. Sure.
Anyways, I love Miguel, but this is one of the few times he's wrong. Well, it's funny because I think Alon used to call it NuGet, and then the NupKeg I can live with, like, you know.
Oh, you can? Oh, I cannot
well, I mean,
stand that.
like, is it, new PKG is kind of like a mouthful.
Package.
New
New
package? Yeah, I
package.
guess you could call it that. Like, I'm fine with NupKeg, but I think it's NuGet, not NuGet.
You don't think it's official. It's the right pronunciation.
There you go. Yeah, you heard it here first.
Right. As long as no one's saying nugget.
Nugget, it's
Then
not
we're good.
Nugget. Yeah. Or NuGet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
15
Well, you
for
have the authority.
$4.99.
So we should respect your authority.
Yeah, that's like GIF and GIF. Like we're getting into these.
Oh, let's
old-
not get there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else you want to share with our audience?
No, I mean, you know, check out the .NET stuff on GitHub, and check out the stuff that I mentioned, the Visual Studio extension if you want to contribute to that.
Yep.
Atom, Electron. We also have some conferences coming up, so if you're interested in learning more about
Yes,
GitHub
yes,
stuff.
yes. Just before we talk about that, everything you mentioned is open source. So yeah, contributions welcome
yeah,
and
just-
and
Yeah,
all
just
that.
about, yeah, so contributions are welcome. Check it out. Try the code.
Yeah, absolutely. Conferences then?
Oh, there's some GitHub conferences. I think we've announced it on the GitHub blog. So we have some in Europe. I think one's coming to, I can't remember if that's public, but we have some conferences. Check out our github.com/blog. So if you want to learn more about the stuff that we're doing, we'll be talking about that stuff. And one of the conferences I think is focused on open source maintainers and kind of trying to, that would be a good place, for example, for the .NET team, language design team to attend and you know, grab GitHub employees in person nicely and let them know what challenges you're facing.
Maybe one last thing, one last question. What would you say to a .NET developer who wants to get into open source and doesn't really know where to start?
Oh, that's a great question. So if you're a .NET open source developer, you want to get into open source.
Well, you're a .NET developer, not open
Oh,
source.
.NET developer, but you want to
Yeah.
get. You know, I would look at open source projects on GitHub that are well run, that you respect. You know, I think, you know, OctaKit and like Scientist.net are kind of small, right? Like they're a good example of like how to get started, right? I would say, like, you know, we have things like the license, you know, picking a license. I actually started a site at GitHub called chooselicense.com. So it kind of helps you walk through. That should be one of the first things, you know, you consider is like, hey, pick a license that makes it very clear how people can use the code you're writing. You know, pick a contributor agreement, like write a contributing doc, write a code of conduct. We have all those templates on GitHub. And then look at, just reach out to other open source maintainers about like sort of the social aspect of, you know, managing source. Like, how do you deal with the fact, how do you deal with entitled developers, right? Like you're going to get them, and you know, learning to, on one level, have a little empathy even for them and realize, like, you know, they're at the end of a long day being frustrated. I actually wrote a blog post about this called "You Don't Need a Thick Skin," about, you know, kind of a way to deal with it that helps you retain your sanity, which is to put yourself on that side and say, yeah, that sucks. You know, unfortunately, like, I don't have time to fix it. You know, I'm a human being, but would you like to help? And often I've had so many responses where people were, you know, coming at me real angry, and then, you know, you express to them, you communicate to them that you're just a human being who has other responsibilities too. And almost is like a pattern. Like the response would be, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. You know, it's the end of a long day. I needed to get home, and this wasn't working, and I was just pissed off, and my wife left me, and you know, like all these things, bad things that happened to him this day. My dog died. It's like a country music song, and like and they apologize though. They're like, yeah, you know, like I shouldn't have lashed out, but I did, and I'm sorry. And so you find a lot of times when people are really that heated, it's a case like that. And so if you can diffuse it, that helps. There will be trolls, and there will be people.
They exist.
And then you can just, now we have this team at GitHub called the Community and Safety Team, And so they've been building out a lot of features that help you navigate and improve your experience on GitHub so that you can close threads, you can block people, you can manage the people that you've blocked. So, in case they've, improved. So you have a lot more control over that too. And getting to know those tools, I think, are very useful as an open source maintainer. Like learning when to close a thread and say, hey, look, we've heard your feedback, thanks for the discussion, but we're going to close this because it's devolved into chaos, right?
Code of conduct helps with that because
Yeah.
it sets where the line is.
Yeah, code of conduct sets where the line is, but like having a document up there is only the beginning. Actually.
Then you need to apply it and
apply,
figure out how to apply
and
it.
like ask the people who are involved to apply it as well. But there's some conferences that help. There's probably too many for me to name. We have a group that kind of focuses on maintainers at GitHub. So, when in doubt, you can always write to support@github.com. I mean, usually it's like about issues with GitHub, like, I don't know how to do this, or this isn't working right. But, I guarantee if you wrote to support@github.com, say, hey, what are resources for me to get better as a maintainer? Like, we'll help you. And hopefully search GitHub first, but no, I don't want like our support people to be overburdened with a bunch of requests, but really, if you can't find this stuff, feel free to email support@github.com because we really care about the open source community. Many of us are ourselves maintainers of open source projects, so we're usually very willing to help others get started.
Excellent. I also want to mention that you have a blog at hacked.com. It's spelled HAACKED.com. And it's gotten less technical over the last few years, but you have lots of really good life advice for developers, which I enjoy every single post, so I recommend everyone go there, but you should write more often.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, it's funny because, as my career has gone from being a developer to more managerial, so has my blog and even my conference talks. So speaking of plugs, I'm going to be the track host for a soft skills track at QCon London in March. So if you're in the London area, come check it out. And I put soft skills in quotes because when you look at what actually makes a team or company effective, right? Learning a new language feature gets you a marginal improvement in productivity, perhaps, if you're lucky. But getting a group of people who aren't working so well together to really gel and work well together can get you an order of magnitude of improvement. And so these talks kind of relate to various different types of skills that we don't normally talk about in the tech community, but could really improve your team, your company, yourself. Some of them are focused individually. So check it out. And so that's been kind of the stuff that's been in my mind lately, and I'll probably be writing more about it as the year goes on.
Cool.
Great. I think I'm going to immediately go read your post about you don't need to have a thick skin right after this.
Yeah, if you're a PM at Microsoft, definitely read it because I think it's even harder as a PM at Microsoft than it was. When I joined GitHub, I just got love, and it was weird. Seriously, the first we released GitHub for Windows, and I was like, okay, I'm prepared for the haters, and it was just love coming all over, and I was like,
oh, wow.
What is going on here? Where are the people calling me, morally bankrupt or this or that, right? And it was quite a welcome change, and Microsoft's come a long way from them too, right? Don't get me wrong, but with such the audience that you have, it does help to realize to be prepared and know how to deal with that negativity that will come at you no matter what you do. Nowadays, GitHub's gotten, I think, big enough where I get plenty of negativity too now. So we've hit that Microsoft level.
Cool, good for you.
Congratulations.
I see. Okay, well, thanks, Phil. It's been a very, very good conversation, I think. I hope you all have enjoyed it, and we'll see all you people again next week.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Kendra. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
For those 2 people watching.
We had a little more than 2, right?